We are all born with our own great needs in life, whether it be dance, sing, write, or even fly. There's an ache inside the hearts of this world's greatest influences that instills them the overwhelming drive of passion to achieve what they've always dreamed of. Charles Bukowski, a novelist and a poet made famous in the late 1900s, saw to it that he lead life as a writer, and only a writer. There were odds against him, as there always are, and yet the attraction he felt to making art out of simple words was stronger than any force that was trying to hold him back. His need to write was all that was keeping him alive. That I have chosen to make him my tribute to because I feel inside of me the same fiery inferno that I believe he must have felt. Charles was far from a picture of elegance and clarity. He's indeed known for his rather dark and gritty writing style. He used alcohol frequently and was known to become violent over even the smallest infractions. Bukowski mentions in an autobiographical novel called Ham on Rye, written in 1982, that his father would often beat him over the smallest offenses, which likely influenced Bukowski himself to react more easily to violence when he got older. Also noted in this work is the bullying and the rejection he experienced from both boys and girls as he was a teenager. However, upon turning 13 years old, a friend invited him over and they raided the family wine cellar together. Bukowski would write about it years later, meaning that it was magic and that he wished he'd been told about the magic of alcohol sooner. He would know he had finally found a lasting friend that he could have with him on command. It seemed that his dependence on alcohol was brought about by his need to belong to something. This is a topic he continuously came back to in writing his poetry, talking often about drunken nights spent alone in his typewriter. Bukowski was a college dropout who left school in Los Angeles to pursue writing in New York City, the buzzing hub of large publishing companies. The fact that there was no guarantee of success was not a factor for deterrence, though. He saw it as a challenge and as a force to be reckoned with. And yet nearly a decade of collecting rejection letters from local publishing agencies, Bukowski finally gave up on his dream of writing, turning instead of alcohol, while traveling across the country on a 10-year drinking binge that nearly killed him. The binge ended in LA, where he attempted to make a living writing again. His dependence on alcohol continued throughout all of this, earning Bukowski a reputation as a hard-living poet, jaded by life. Finally, he began his true writing career with publications in underground newspapers. It was not the notoriety of the newspapers that brought his name to light, however. It was the very words he wrote that resonated with a large amount of people, who in turn spoke to those they knew about a new poet named Charles Bukowski, who struck a chord in them somehow. Bukowski was no narcissist. The majority of his works revolved around an autobiographical main character named Henry Chinaski. The character was portrayed as a loser who worked small jobs and got drunk often, making love to those just as low on the social totem pole as he. While in real life, Bukowski was completely alone romantically. He had married a small-town poet named Barbara Fryer, who he then divorced years later, then settled down and married again, this time with no divorce. There was an air of solidarity yet in all of his major poems, and his autobiographical character was never granted a successful love story of his own. The only exception to this rule was his reference to his second wife, Linda, in the novels Hollywood and Woman. She was the basis for which the character named Sarah was settled on. Bukowski wrote over 40 books of poetry and prose, as well as a few novels. He constructed an ever-flowing world that connected all of his works together. This world was made out of booze, sex, gambling, and the arts. Bukowski connected everything back to the very idea of living to the fullest, which was him often suffering to the fullest as well. Also a topic of major connection in his writings was death, which seemed to find its way into every poem. Love and death were often made comparable. This is the most greatly illuminated in a letter Charles wrote to an anonymous recipient. My dear, find what you love and let it kill you. Death came for Bukowski, as it comes for everyone and will come for all of us, just as well. Bukowski's only argument against the inevitability of death is finding a way to mortality, as long as those remembering can keep you alive. Bukowski writes in one work, if you are reading this after I am dead, it means that I have made it. On Bukowski's gravestone, the phrase, don't try, is printed. This is a phrase taken from one of his poems that advises writers and poets to find creativity by not trying to find it. Bukowski argues in many words that writing will come naturally, and one should only write if they must, if they don't have to try, if it forces themselves out of the person. An excerpt from one of his poems describing that is this. Unless it comes out of your soul like a rocket, unless being still would drive you to madness or suicide or murder, don't do it. Unless the sun inside you is burning your gut, don't do it. When it is truly time, if you have chosen, it will do it by itself and it will keep on doing it until it dies or it dies in you. There's no other way, and there never was. While many have predicted that death would come from Bukowski in the form of alcohol poisoning or drug overdose, it was leukemia that eventually caused his demise. His death may have been a quiet one, unmarked by suddenness or by chaos, but his life caused a great stir in the literary world. He's a staple of poetry, up there with Robert Frost and Sylvia Plath. Many ask why, despite his success, a tribute should be made to a drunk with jaded viewpoints and nasty habits. But I believe in what's real, and so did Charles Bukowski. The world's a harsh place, and we are all doomed to be burnt by life's tragedies. But, as Bukowski has said in the title of one of his books of poetry, it is not the fact that you have been burnt that matters. What matters most is how well you walk through the fire. You will burn in this life, but burn well. Bukowski sure did.
Thank you, Erin. So that was, I think you really captured